We're here today because we've got a very special visitor. Over the last few years, we've become really accustomed to welcoming visitors in Black History Month, for Black History Month in the autumn term. And we've done lots of different things. We've looked at the place of Black history in the UK with David Olashoga. We've looked at the history of Black music in the UK with Jeffrey Boache. We've talked about being a pioneer in the media industry with David Llewellyn Benjamin. And we've heard about some of the UK's darkest moments last year with Stuart Lawrence. And we even heard Testament Beatbox last year. And I thought it was about time that we looked at our own history here in GSAL. Some of you know that we've got a proud history of producing some really elite sports people, and we are very, very proud of the chap that I'm about to introduce you to. With regards to this gentleman over here to my right, I asked a colleague to dig into the archives, and they found an assembly notice from Friday the 16th of October 2009, so I can't even do the maths, that's 9 years ago. I hope that's right, otherwise I'll be in trouble with the maths department. They don't employ me to do maths, they employ me to do languages. That, I'm aware, is before many of you were even born, so I'm going to read you that assembly notice from 2009. Diving, we have talked about the success of our 3 divers before. Last weekend, Yona Knight Wisdom, Louise Moran and Hannah Starling, all in year 10, took part in the British Gas National Cup diving competition at Ponds Ford in Sheffield. This is a senior level event, open to all comers of all ages, including divers like Tom Daly. Our 3 divers are, of course, all juniors. Yona entered the 3-metre diving, came 9th in the prelim, just missing the final. Their achievements at this level are outstanding and they are close to making a big difference in the sport. Well, Yona did certainly make a big difference in the sport. I would like to welcome a professional sport person, Yona Knight Wisdom, to tell us all about his career in diving after leaving GSAL. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The story about that finishing 9th and just missing out on the final is quite ironic, and you'll find out why. But today I want to talk to you a little bit about the importance of self-belief and tell you a bit about my journey to help put that into perspective. So as I've written on this slide right here, at the end of the day, it's just a bit of metal, and I wish that I had one of those medals to show you, but unfortunately I don't. I didn't quite make it onto the podium at Paris 2024, but for me, an Olympic medal or any kind of medal, it just represents a good day at the office. It doesn't necessarily represent who you are or how good you are. It's just a good day at the office. So I've had good days, I've had bad days. On the good days, I've got some medals. On the bad days, I haven't. But it's not defined my diving career, which is really, really cool. So I've never really been motivated by medals. Just the few occasions where I've actually gone into a competition thinking that I could potentially win a medal, I've generally not. And that's quite hard to deal with. So I tended to go into a competition thinking that if I was to get a medal, it'd just be a bonus. So first I want to tell you a little bit about my career in the key moments that I went through. So first of all, this is when I started diving in June 2004, just a little one right there. Miss Rusbach is a teacher in primary, and actually we figured out that the girl on the top right is also a teacher in primary, and I didn't even know that she was working here, which is quite cool. But I was selected in a TID program, so that stands for Talent Identification. And it literally took place in this very room. The diving club from City of Leeds came to the school to run this program where they just tested people to see if they had any ability, any capability to potentially become a good diver. So it was tests like sprints or chin-ups or flexibility, things like that. And I turned out to be really, really good. I did gymnastics previously, so I got selected, got to go back to the pool and try it out and see where I got to. And I just absolutely loved it and never wanted to stop. But also in this picture is Hannah Starling, right in the middle in the blue. She is an Olympian from London. She went here. This girl right here, she also went to 2 Olympic Games in Rio and in London. The little girl at the front on the right, she went to school here called Lucy Harris. She played in the Netball Super League. And we also had a diver who stood just in front of Miss Rusbach to the left. He performs on cruise ships in diving shows. So it was a really successful TID group, one of the first in the country. And just after that, in August of 2004, I watched the Athens Olympic Games, and that was a huge inspiration for me because I saw these two divers, Leon Taylor on the left and Pete Waterfield on the right, and they won a silver medal. For me, that was such an inspiration because I watched that and decided there and then that I wanted to be an Olympian in diving. And I'd literally just started the sport. So it was a completely ambitious, completely unrealistic dream at that time, but it became my dream. It became what I wanted, and I became absolutely obsessed with the Olympics. I would watch every single event as much as possible. I would follow all the results and know all the athletes, and I'm still like that now. If I wasn't in Paris, I'd probably be sat at home watching everything all day long, because I absolutely love what the Olympic Games represents, and I just wanted to be a part of it. Not long after that, in 2006, this was my first international competition representing my club, not my country. It was in Eindhoven, and I won, ironically, a silver medal. And that was the first time that I realized I was actually quite decent at diving, and I could have a potential future in the sport if I kept on working hard. The improvement was really obvious to see. Following that was in 2011, so the picture on the left, I made the decision to represent Jamaica, which is why I'm wearing this tracksuit. Obviously quite tall for a diver. Most divers are a little bit shorter than me, and I always found it difficult. There was always divers that were better than me in my age group, so I decided to take a different pathway once I didn't get selected onto a program, and that pathway involved trying to represent Jamaica, who my dad is Jamaican, so that's how I was able to get the citizenship. But it was a real challenge of going it alone and taking the step into the unknown, because the last diver before me that represented Jamaica was in 1972. So it was a long time that Jamaica didn't have any kind of representation in diving. And I then gave up the possibility of getting funding from UK Sport. I couldn't get like sports science support, physio, nutrition. I couldn't get help in those kind of areas, and I had to figure out a lot of things myself. So for example, at the age of 17, I had to go and find a sponsor because I needed someone to fund my journeys. Traveling to competitions around the world to gain experience is expensive. And I reached out to Levi Roots, who is there on the right, and if you don't know him, he went on a show called Dragon's Den, got an investment, and now has a really, really successful company called Reggae Sauce. And I reached out to him via email. At first got a no, which I was a bit upset with, and then my dad convinced me to send another email with a video, and he eventually came back with a yes. We drove down to London to have a meeting, literally a 4-hour drive down with my mum and my coach for a 45-minute meeting, and then a 4-hour drive back up. And in that meeting, I described what I wanted to do, how I felt that I could achieve it. We set out a goal and a plan, and the whole goal was to get to the Rio 2016 Olympics to represent Jamaica there. And a few years later, I asked Levi why he invested in me, and his main reason was literally the passion that I spoke about my diving with, the way that I knew the steps, the way that I knew what I wanted to achieve. That was enough for him to invest in me and help support me. And without his investment, I definitely wouldn't be standing in front of you here today, because I wouldn't have gained all those years of experience. I wouldn't have qualified for the Olympics, and I probably would have retired from diving much earlier than I have done now, because not making it to games would have been pretty tough for me. So they were some really, really key moments in my diving career, all very early on. They very much set the foundation for everything I went on to achieve. This is a list of my diving achievements. So there were some very good results in this list. There were some very bad results. 3 Olympic Games. I finished 14th in Rio, which was a major surprise because I was just happy to be there at that time. I finished 15th in Tokyo, which was the opposite. I was pretty upset with that finishing position. And then I'll tell you all about Paris. I went to 3 Pan American Games, made the final at all 3 of those, 3 Commonwealth Games, the Central American Caribbean Games, obviously on that side of the world representing Jamaica, the Aquatics World Championships in various locations around the world. And again, they had very, very mixed results. For example, in Barcelona and in Kazan, I was in the 30s in terms of my finishing position, whereas in Budapest, I made the semi-final, Doha, I made the semi-final. So a lot of experience was gained over those years by competing and taking lessons from every single result. So rather than getting caught up in the actual result, rather than thinking, I need to win a medal, I need to make the final, and if I don't do that, I'm not happy. If I dive badly, fortunately, apart from the Olympic qualifiers, fortunately I had time to reflect on it and take the lessons and learn how I could get a little bit better the next time. That was really, really, really important. And that's where Levi was really helpful, because he was giving me the sponsorship and the funding to be able to do all these competitions without the pressure. So I was super grateful for that. And then at the bottom, we have the Diving World Cups and Grand Prix, which are events slightly lower down, but still a very, very high standard, competing against some really, really good quality divers. Continued, I made the top 12 and made the finals in quite a few of those events, which is amazing, especially the World Championships. To make the top 12 in some events there is tough, because you're literally competing against some of the best divers in the world. So that was quite reassuring whenever that happened, that I was actually up there, because there were elements of self-doubt that creep in. Even if you have good performance, you still have doubts about yourself. So when you get a good result, it just reinforces that you're actually doing quite well. And the 4 medals that I won, as I said earlier, it was ironic that I won 2 silvers at my first international. I only ever won a silver medal at international level. I'd never won a gold medal, I'd never won a bronze, and it was literally just those 4. The Diving World Cup in Rio was probably the best one, because that was the same event that I qualified for my first games, and then literally the next day went to the final and had just the most unbelievable event, which resulted in a silver medal, and quite an iconic event that a lot of divers internationally who were there still remember seeing and still tell me about their experience of watching me competing there, which is really cool to hear. In 2016 as well, I actually ended the year ranked 6th in the world, which was crazy, because the diving rankings aren't perfect. They don't work as well as tennis rankings, for example. So it wasn't probably a true reflection, but to be rated that high above some amazing divers, that showed how well I was diving that year. And that's something that I'll always remember. But the target for me, especially after the 15th place finish in Tokyo, was to make the Paris Olympic final. I knew I had the capability to make the final if I had a good day, but to get a good day in diving is tough, and it's quite rare. So I was trying to make sure I put all the things in place to have a good opportunity to make the final there. Even with all those achievements, Paris absolutely was not inevitable at all. I had some really tough times, especially from 22 onwards. So I'll talk you through the timeline. In 2022, at the Commonwealth Games, that's when I reached my peak of performance. I was performing at my absolute best then. I still didn't get a medal at the Commonwealth Games, which was really frustrating, because I was really hoping that I would. But I put in some of my best scores, especially on 3 meter, scores that would have got me a medal at the last Commonwealth Games, but it was just unfortunate that everyone else actually chose to dive better on that day. So I was really excited at that point, because in just a year's time, it was the World Championships in Japan. That was the first qualification opportunity for Paris, where I had to try and make the top 12 to get my spot. The next opportunity was the Pan American Games in Santiago. To qualify there, you have to win, which is quite challenging. And then the next opportunity, the final opportunity after that, was the World Championships in Doha, which was just earlier this year. And to qualify there, again, you had to finish in the top 12. But if you didn't finish in the top 12, you might have a chance of getting in the spot if you were just below that kind of position. So that was a timeline I was hoping for. Obviously, reaching my peak there, I was hoping to just maintain my peak, working through in training to get to that World Championships, qualify first time individually. And I actually got a synchro partner as well, so I was hoping to be able to focus on synchro qualification in Doha, because synchro is a little bit tougher. There's only 8 spots that can compete at the Olympic Games in synchro. And one of those spots goes to the host nation. And then there's probably like 12 or 13 teams that could finish in those other 7 spots. We were very much in that conversation, but we had to have a very good day. So I was hoping to just put all my focus there. But I was hit with a very serious knee injury in the December of 2022. I tore the rectus femoris tendon, which is the one just here, attaches the main quad muscle to the kneecap. And that really put me under pressure, because I was now in a race against time to get fit, not just for the World Championships in 2023, but for the World Championships in 2024, the last qualification opportunity. After that knee injury, fortunately, it was one where they could operate on it quite quickly. So within 3 days of the injury happening, I had surgery. I had to wear a brace for 2 months where I literally could only bend my knee that much. My quad muscle wasted away. Once the brace came off, I couldn't even bend my leg. It took me probably like 3 weeks after the surgery to even be able to lift my leg up off the floor, just like that. Very simple things became huge, huge achievements after that injury. I got back in the water in February 2023, 2 months after the surgery, and then got back to my first competition, which was actually much, much quicker than I expected. In May 2023, I pushed really hard those 5 months to get back because I knew the key to preparing for the World Championships was to have as much time to gain all the experience again. I literally felt like I was starting from scratch. So I worked really, really hard to get back as quickly as possible. Returned to competition in May, which was pretty successful actually based on the circumstances. It went much better than I anticipated. And then in Japan, remember I said I needed to finish in the top 12 to qualify my spot at the first opportunity. I finished 33rd, so I was way off. But in the context of the injury, I wasn't actually that far behind all the people that I was competing against to try and qualify a spot. So moving on from that, I got to Doha, had some challenges. Obviously, I didn't dive so well in Santiago at the Pan American Games. I was pretty far off winning that. That was unrealistic. And had to go through a period of just like rebuilding myself mentally to get ready for the World Champs, because that was going to be a hugely pressurized environment and I needed to be confident, and I wasn't confident at that time. So I did a lot of work on my self-belief. But I got to Doha, finished 14th, so just outside of that top 12, but I knew it was good enough to get me my Olympic spot. It just took a little while to get the confirmation because that didn't come until June of 2024, so literally just a month before the Olympic Games. That's when I got my confirmation. But between the World Championships in 2024 in February and the confirmation in June, we had a World Cup circuit, and after qualifying, after the World Championships, I was on such a high because I knew I'd dived well, I knew I'd got my spot. And the first World Cup event was great. The second World Cup event wasn't so good. The third was even worse. And I had a major dip in confidence and self-belief once again, just like I did after Santiago. So the goal of making it to the Olympic final was seemingly quite unrealistic at that point, and I didn't think that I would be able to make it all the way to that level. But I trusted in my ability, I trusted in my coach, I worked really, really hard and put some focus onto working on my mind because the body was getting back into the place that I needed to be. So this was literally my bedroom wall in the leads to Paris. One of those sheets represent a week of my life. And the way I kind of structured it was I had like a little quote, which I'll show you a little bit more about. And then in each box, I had a place to write my daily goal. So the goal would be as small as taking the bins out that day, or as big as getting a 7 on a particular dive. It had a range, but it allowed me to just stay focused on the process and stay focused on the little improvements each and every single day, rather than thinking about the bigger picture, rather than thinking about, oh, I'm not ready for Paris, I'm not going to dive well, and getting stressed about that. I could just take each day as it came. So I had the daily goal. I would write the outcome based on how I felt about that goal, whether I achieved it or not. Above that, I would write a ranking for the day. So I'd rate myself out of 10 based on how well the day was. The lowest numbers were like a 2 if I had a really tough day. For example, I had a couple of situations where I hurt my neck, and that was a bad day because I was a bit frustrated about that, all the way up to a 9. I don't think I ever actually got a 10 because it's hard to have a perfect day. I think even Olympic gold medalists don't have a perfect day. There's still places where they could improve. And then below was something that was really important was visualization as well. So visualizing myself competing in Paris, visualizing just what the pool looked like, visualizing myself in the pool, and just being comfortable with it. So when I actually got to Paris, I had almost been through it like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times in my head, so I wasn't overwhelmed by the situation at all. That helped so much. So I'll show you some of the quotes a little bit bigger. All I need is within me right now. I'm driven by my future. I'm getting better every day. Life is what you make it. I believe I can do this. I'm confident in my ability. You can see these quotes are literally just hammering away, just trying to convince myself that I'm actually good, that I'm actually okay, and believing that I can do what I'm hoping to do. And literally just sitting in my room, or if I walk in before going to bed and I just read one of those quotes, and it might not be anything major at that point, but it would sit in my mind, and it would just like reinforce that I'm doing well and I'm on the right track. That's the most important thing. Nothing beats superior preparation. Think positive and stay persistent. Positivity is one of my biggest things. I love the idea of being positive about the future and positive about what might happen rather than looking at things negatively. It just makes life so much easier for me. So I would 100% recommend being just positive at all points. My success is inevitable. Don't try to be perfect, try to be better. And in diving, actually perfection is not what you're aiming for. You're trying to be as good as possible. You're trying to minimize the mistakes that you make. So every single day, if I was trying to just improve a little bit rather than trying to be perfect, that would mean that I wouldn't be getting as frustrated at myself. I wouldn't be falling short of my goal constantly. I'd be kind of meeting the mark, which was great. Pressure is a privilege. Competing at the Olympics is a high pressure event, and success is a result of belief. And I mean, I knew I would be fine once I got on the board at the competition. I knew I'd be fine, but the challenge was getting there in one piece, physically and mentally. That was the challenge. But the progress was really, really clear to see with that structure on my wall. Unfortunately, I missed the final by 3.8 points, which is really, really close. So all of that work, all of that believing and dreaming, it still left me short of my goal. But without all of that, I don't think I would have got that close. Because frankly, I think that was a miracle. Based on the way that I was diving, based on my injury, based on my training, I don't even think I should have been that close. There were so many better divers than me in that event, but my belief was probably higher than some of the others, which allowed me to get that close. And fortunately, I was able to share it with some of my friends and family. A few of those came to this school. So these three boys up here, him there, and then him there, they all came to school as well. And to them, I was always the guy that was going to be at the Olympics. I was always the guy that wanted to make it. And it was really, really cool for them to come and see me compete, especially after Tokyo, which was held behind closed doors and no one could come and watch that. It was pretty amazing. And James made the massive picture of my face, which when I walked out just before the competition saw that, I got a bit of a surprise. That was pretty tough to see, especially whilst I was trying to get in the zone. But I want to engage you all a little bit now. So we're gonna try and cooperate a little bit. There's a question up there, and there's one side and the other. I'm going to ask you to stand up if you believe in one thing, and ask you to stay sat down if you believe in the other thing. So everyone can get involved in this. And there's no right answers. So if you're the only one that's standing up, don't worry. So what is more important in your opinion? Is talent more important or hard work? Stand up if you think talent is more important. That's so interesting. I did a talk at Round A School on Wednesday and no one stood up for talent as well, which is very interesting because hard work, 100% important, but also talent is very important. Like, I was very lucky that I was talented as a diver. My talent in diving allowed me to enjoy it. And maybe without the talent, I wouldn't have been as keen to put in the hard work. But also, you don't have to be talented to work hard to then improve. So it's interesting that no one stood up. Let's say no right answer. I probably would have stood up for talent, to be honest. So the next one is, if you make a mistake, is it a good thing or a bad thing? So I want you to stand up if you think it's a good thing. Okay, great. Sit yourselves back down. Very interesting again. Again, a very similar result to Round A. Making mistakes is absolutely a good thing because that's where you learn the most lessons. If you think it's a bad thing, that's not a bad thing because it just means that you aim for a very, very high level. And if you make a mistake, it's frustrating. But you just have to learn to control your frustration if you think that making a mistake is a bad thing. Because carrying that frustration through will just lead you to make more mistakes, which then becomes more and more of a bad thing. So again, no right answers. Next one, when you are struggling, do you soldier it alone or do you ask for help? If you ask for help, stand up. Cool, a little bit less, sit yourselves back down. Very good. I'm very, very, very stubborn. I will always try and soldier it alone, which is not always the right thing to do. But also, when you soldier it alone, I actually think you learn because you're learning from trial and error, and I think that's a great thing. But also, asking for help makes you get to where you want to be a lot quicker because when you ask for help, normally the person that you're asking knows and can tell you the answer a little bit quicker than you trying to figure it out yourself. So I would have stood up for soldier alone, but asking for help is definitely a good thing to do as well. Next one is, if you're faced with a challenge, do you approach it or do you avoid it? If you approach it, stand up. Very good, sit down. Okay, that was a bit more of a 50-50 split, maybe slightly more towards the standing up. I definitely do both. Sometimes as a challenge, I'm really keen to break that barrier down and achieve whatever the challenge is, or prove someone wrong that thinks that I can't achieve that thing. So I definitely try and approach it sometimes. There's definitely other challenges where I realize it's just not worth the effort, so I just avoid it and leave it. So for me, it's just about weighing up whether it's worthwhile putting the time and energy into trying to break that challenge down, because there's certain things that just can't be done. So there's no point approaching it every single time. So I'd probably stand up for approach it for sure, but there's definitely times where I avoid it, so that's not a bad thing at all. The next one is, do you all have a specific goal that you want to achieve? If the answer is yes, stand up. Good, sit yourselves back down. and that's absolutely fine if you did not stand up, because creating a goal is hard. Like, it could be anything, it could be sport related, it could be school related, whatever. But I definitely believe you should always have a goal to work towards, whether it's in the long term, whether it's in the medium term or the short term. As I said, like the daily goal that I set myself, it could be something as small as taking the bins out that day. It's always good to have some kind of goal, whether it's daily or weekly or monthly, whatever. But if you have something that you can work towards, then make sure it's realistic, and I'm sure you've talked about SMART goals and all of that, so it's definitely good to have goals to aim towards. The last one is, how do you feel about the future? Excited, both, or scared? So if you're scared, stay sat down. If you're excited, stand up. If you're both, stand up with your hands up. Brilliant, sit down. Yeah, I'm absolutely both. I'm very excited about the future and also very scared. I'm hitting a very strange point in my life where I've retired from diving now, and I'm trying to progress into what's next, and I just have no idea what's next. Or I have a plan, I know what I'm trying to achieve, but I don't know how it's going to turn out because I've been so used to diving for such a long time. This is completely alien to me, so it's very scary, and that's good to be scared by the future, because that means that you're probably challenging yourself, but you also want to be excited, you want to be positive about it, because you want it to look prosperous and potentially go well. So I think both is a pretty fair answer. I think everyone kind of went with that. So I just want to wrap up with individuals experience challenge in different ways, so don't be caught up in what other people are doing, because you don't want to worry about that. Believe in yourself, because the more you believe in yourself, it'll inspire people to support you more, and that'll help you get where you want to be much faster. Success is what you make it. So as I mentioned at the very start, if you get a medal, amazing, brilliant, absolutely brilliant, but if you're not satisfied by it, or whatever, it doesn't necessarily mean anything. You could finish 13th, and for me, 13th was a huge success. It doesn't matter what other people think, it doesn't matter the pressure that's put on you. So if you win awards, if you win medals, if you win trophies, it really doesn't matter unless you're inherently satisfied and inherently content with what you've done. So that's where I'll leave it, and I'd like to open it up to the questions that I think Ms. Haynes-Boyce has, but thank you very much for listening.
And you would like to know the questions aren't numbered, so I can't make them on maths and stuff. First of all, what was your favourite subject at school? don't feel obliged to say languages here.
I'm gonna say, well, PE is the obvious answer, isn't it? Because I quite enjoy PE. But then my PE teachers always made us do cross country before games, which I hated. So I will say English is actually one of my favourite subjects, surprisingly. Yeah. I also had a teacher called Miss Brown who was one of my favourite teachers, not putting my other teachers down that are still here. But yeah, I had some good times in English.
Did you enjoy school lunches?
Funnily enough, I often spent the majority of my lunchtime playing football outside with my friends, and I would literally kind of go in right at the end to get like a muffin or something. So my diet probably wasn't very good. My favourite thing about school lunches was fish and chip Fridays. So perfect timing.
How did you balance training with school?
It was tough. Obviously, having to keep up with homework and everything was challenging. And you know, when I go away for a competition, that was tough. But I always made sure that I got things done as soon as possible, which was the case maybe 90% of the time, because I didn't want to like be playing catch up or leaving things to the last minute, having to stay up late and things like that, because then that would affect my training the next day and probably would make my teachers not very happy as well. So I tried to do that and just make sure I communicated with my teachers and with my coaches as well, to make sure that they knew when I was struggling or if I needed to spend a bit more time doing one thing or the other. The communication definitely helped.
Who inspires you?
I'm inspired by a lot of people, and it's not necessarily like public figures that are very high up. It's often people around me that are very close to me. So my coach that I spent a lot of time with in Edinburgh just recently, she was very, very inspiring to me. And I mean, who better to be inspired by than your coach? And then some other athletes that I compete with, they're very inspiring with the way that they push themselves. Also people outside of diving as well. Seeing my friends that have progressed in life, it's very inspiring to me because it makes me want to keep on pushing. When I was younger, my sporting inspirations were people like Usain Bolt, Lewis Hamilton. I loved watching those. I've been able to meet Usain Bolt, which is pretty exciting. Haven't met Lewis yet, so I need to do that soon, hopefully. But yeah, it's really cool to meet your idols.
Right. And do you ever feel scared on a dive?
Yeah, more often than not, I'm pretty terrified when I get on the board. But not terrified in that I'm like literally shaking with fear, but like worried that I'm going to get it wrong or worried that I'm going to potentially make a mistake. But I try and balance that by just focusing on what I need to do and focus on my cues and trying to deliver those as best as possible, and then it will eventually result in a good dive. But yeah, there's definitely times where I've gotten on the board and something's happened and I've hurt myself, and then the next time I'm going to do that dive, there's a bit of fear in there, and yeah, that's the nature of diving.
And then sort of related to that, how do you cope with the pressure of the crowd?
I try to ignore it as much as possible. So if I was diving, I wouldn't be looking up at you guys as I am now. I'd be like staring down at the board when I'm competing. And you know, I'll go back to the slide with my face on it. This one. Imagine looking up and seeing that in the crowd when you're about to do a dive. So when I walked out and saw the face, I was like, right, I know exactly where to not look when I'm on the board. I literally looked straight in front of me to just ignore the crowd as much as possible. And again, focusing on my cues, focusing on the things that I need to do to make a good dive, listening to what my coach has said. That's what helped me cope with the pressure. But it also just comes with experience over the years, you know. I learned how to control my emotions, how to breathe, how to use music, how to use different psychological strategies so that when I did get on the board, I was calm and I was confident. Yeah, they were some of the things that I did.
Okay, I forgot to ask you one question, by the way, when we were talking about school a minute ago. What house were you in?
Oh, I was in Powell. I heard Powell were pretty good now. They weren't that good when I was at school. I back Powell all the way.
Okay, so what's diving? What was your preferred sport?
Yeah, so I started diving when I was 9. Before that, I did gymnastics and I learned how to swim. But when I was at school, I did football, rugby, cricket, athletics. I did literally everything that I could do. But diving was always the one that I enjoyed the most. It was the one that I was best at. And fortunately, it was indoor, so during winter, I didn't have to be outside too much, which made it a little bit easier. So yeah, it was always the preferred one.
And does diving hurt? Somebody wants to know.
Yeah, it does. As I mentioned, you know, there's times where you get it wrong and you land on your back or on your face, and yeah, it can reduce you to tears sometimes, but it builds character. So That's the most important thing.
Okay, and there was a question that was promised one of the pupils earlier that we would ask, what was it like staying in the Olympic Village? Somebody said, where did you stay? Were you in Paris?
Yeah.
What was it like in the Olympic Village? And what were the chocolate muffins?
First of all, the chocolate muffins were unbelievable, especially if you got one and you held it for a little while and let the inside of it melt, because there was like a gooey bit in the inside. It was phenomenal. I also saw the Muffin Man as well. I don't know if you guys saw the Muffin Man, but I saw him in person. The village was really cool. I'm a massive sports fan, so if I wasn't in Paris, I would have been watching the games 100%. And that means I know a lot of the athletes. So just being in the village and like Noah Lyles is sat over there. You see Simone Biles in the corner. I met Andy Murray. I met Serena Williams at previous games as well. Just like walking around the village and seeing these phenomenal, like, outstanding athletes, being in the same team as Usain Bolt. I was team captain for the Jamaica Olympic team as well, alongside Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce, who's an absolute legend. So those kind of things are really cool. You might have seen a bit about the beds. The beds were okay. It was a cardboard structure. They were a bit firm for me, but they were all right. You can't really expect the best accommodation at the Olympics, because they literally came for 15,000 people. But it's a really cool vibe in the village, and it's definitely something that you can't really experience anywhere else.
Okay, that was my next question, was about cardboard beds. So we'll move on from that. How did you decide to dive for Jamaica?
So I think, as I mentioned, I was struggling to make it into the British team, and there was one moment where I didn't get selected for an England talent program, so not even like Team GB squad. Then there was the next year I didn't get picked for the junior European team, and my coaches suggested to me that I'd maybe look to represent Jamaica or Barbados. So my dad's from Jamaica, my mum's from Barbados, and basically, the idea of being on the same team as Usain Bolt was very, very intriguing, and that's something that I wanted to pursue. So I chose Jamaica, and the rest is history. It's absolutely changed my life for the better.
Okay, final question.
Yep.
This is a really, really, really important question. I've even highlighted it yellow. It's the most important question. Who's the most famous person in your phone?
To be fair, it's probably quite boring. It's probably just Tom Daly. But I spent so many years training alongside him. Yeah, I think it's probably Tom. He's pretty famous though, isn't he? He's pretty famous. Everyone knows who Tom is.
I have more questions, but I'm hoping we've covered a good range of questions there. Thank you very much to everybody who did submit questions. And thank you for just an enormous round of applause for Yona for coming in to see us.
Thank you. Thanks so much.